Well, thank you, Jackie. And as you know, when you do these things on behalf of 8 different associations, you have to be mindful of what you're saying, right? So you told me especially no reading of stuff and no PowerPoints. However, respecting all the organizations, I do want to have some help here. So the industry declaration today, it signifies a continued commitment of all those 8 associations to reach a common goal in the European aviation industry to create the world's most efficient and environmentally friendly sky. And it can only be achieved, as the declaration says, through collective action across all branches of aviation. And it's already shown by the commitment of 5 of our associations to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050 through the Destination 2050 initiative that we've launched. But this declaration is broader than the Destination 2050 statement, and it's broader also about environmental efficiency, because it also addresses the promise of maximizing capacity. And digitization will be key to our efforts to breakthrough technologies, and that's why we are very happy to be here at the SESAR Day, supported by the SESAR program. And that's why we named the update of the ATM Master Plan specifically as the first step for transformation of European skies. And therefore, I would say all our associations, as you can see on the association on the left of me, we support this declaration. I really think that the time to act is now.
Thank you very much indeed. And that emphasis on the urgency. We've talked all day about how we have made a lot of progress. We've been hearing about the progress under SESAR 2020, but how do we accelerate? How do we, particularly on the deployment side, but also in the development of new solutions? Benjamin Binet, if I could come to you from Thales first. The master plan emphasizes how important ATM is, modernized ATM. We've heard about it all day long. How would you assess, before we get into where we need to go from here, your assessment of where we are now, how well we are doing? Because I've heard a mixed picture today. Some people saying 80% there, 20% to go, others feeling a little more pessimistic about progress so far. What is your assessment of where we are?
Yes. I don't know if I want to play the percentage game. I mean, I like what Herman van Frikanten said. We've done 80%, but the 20% is the hardest to do. Or we could say the opposite. You know, we've done a 20% and we'll focus on the next 80%. I think a lot has been done. The question is, have we done the right thing? That's a good question. We've done the right thing, but I mean, I think we were missing a sense of urgency, and we live in a very safety, engineering, scientific world of air traffic management and etc. We tend to forget the intangible part, and I think what we've done today, what Michiel shown today, is something. It's tangible now, but it's more an intangible part. It's a commitment we feel as an industry, as all players accountable for something, and etc. For good or bad reasons, the last 20 years, we focused on transforming the ATM for efficiency, which was good. I mean, let's say it. Having more planes in the airspace, better safety, more money, and etc. But somehow we didn't succeed completely to transform it. Let's say it. I mean, I think we all admit it. So, is now the climate emergency, which I personally think is an emergency, something that's going to help us going faster? Yes, I tend to believe it. I think somebody said green will federate us. I think it's Marc from IFATCA this morning. I really believe in that. So yes, we haven't done all we haven't done the whole. We haven't gone all the way, but I believe that yes, the green urgency will help us going faster. Yep.
Thank you very much. Jörg, from your perspective, how do you see the challenge? How do you see where we are now?
Well, I believe it is not that much. Did we achieve 80%? Did we achieve 20%? And where are we really? I think we made some steps forward. And what I heard the whole day, and I think that is very important, I think we all agree that the development has to be accelerated. The question is how? How do we achieve this? And I think this question hasn't been answered today. I think it is tremendously important how we achieve it. And I would like to give you an example. I heard from Marilyn from Eurocontrol as well how important TBO is. I fully agree. We see this as a game changer as well from our perspective, that really is able to provide for the reduction of emissions. But when we look at the regulation, there is a mandate for the airlines to equip aircraft with ADAC EPP in 2028. 2028 forward fit. That means from 2028 on, we are starting to actually fitting aircraft with ADAC EPP, which is a prerequisite for TBO. So I think what we need is, we need as an industry more entrepreneurship and more entrepreneurial risk actually. A mandate is fine, but what can we do beforehand? I think that is very important. I can only give you an example from our company, because we had a discussion within the company. We are going to receive about 60 new A320 until the year 28. They all won't be equipped with ADAC EPP. And they will be in service until the year 2050. So we don't create the effect of TBO. So we made the decision at Lufthansa to equip now all aircraft with ADAC EPP. That is an entrepreneurial risk that we took, because we don't really know what's going to happen. There is going to be a gate. But that is what we need as an industry, I think. Not too much stick to the mandates, but take entrepreneurial
Just to
risk.
pick up on that, why did you take that decision in that case, given the risk?
Because we believe it. We see a clear business case behind TBO. And TBO is one of those game changers, I would say, where we see the biggest lever to reduce actually CO2 emissions in Europe.
I asked because Philippe Cornelius was talking earlier about in some areas where the modernization is not happening as fast as it could, and he talked about people lacking the incentive to modernize. So interesting to see that you, in this case, it is the clear business case. Marc, Hamy, from an Airbus perspective, your assessment of where we are now and the challenge ahead. There's a mic in front of you. Oh, you've got one. Perfect.
Does it work? Yes, it works. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. A few background. Why, as manufacturer, we are in SESAR? Because at Airbus, we have the feeling that the challenge we have ahead of us, mainly digitalization and climate, they are requiring really a full transformation of our sector, a step change. And this step change has to happen on technology, on energy, new fuel and disruptive technologies as hydrogen aircraft. On decarbonization, I mean carbon capture and sequestration, example, and on ATM. And the step change for ATM is, according to us, through the integration of the ground and the board. This is what will make a change. Use all the capabilities of the aircraft to build a better ATM and do a common and joint development of the capability of the aircraft and the ground. To achieve that, the first thing is a link between the ground, which is obvious. It is the data link. It has been a long journey to set up the data link. We have now the basic infrastructure, I would say, the data link, still to be developed for more robustness and capacity. So this is the backbone, but now we have to put on top of it the operational concept, and this is TBO, time-based operation mainly. And for that, yes, we need a perfect coordination now on the development in the aircraft and on the ground to implement the TBO, because we are speaking of the best way of flying. We know the best way of flying. This is to offer to the airline the perfect flight, the optimum trajectory, continuous climb, best level of flight, direct route, continuous descending, and so on. This is TBO. And to achieve that, we need this perfect coordination and probably to go step by step. And we have one step, the EPP or the AF6, to start sending to the ground the trajectory of the aircraft and build something together. So we are here. One step back is the backbone, the infrastructure, but one step forward, perhaps not that difficult because the technical solutions are existing. It's really a question of coordination to decide all together to implement the onboard equipment and the ground. And if we do so, we'll be successful. I will just add one thing. In the DNA of SESAR, there is this idea of the trajectory-based operation, but innovation. We still have a lot of innovation to be developed in SESAR. Fellow fly, you know the concept of using the energy of the vertex. And non-CO2, which is part of this declaration, is the next challenge for us. It's a complex issue. If we have time to come back on it, we need to learn and to develop innovative solutions to address non-CO2. So we are here at the middle of the of the bridge. We have to congratulate SESAR with what has been achieved. We have the infrastructure, the backbone. Now we need to develop the operational concept together.
Thank you very much indeed. Tine, would you agree with the assessment so far?
Yes.
I was hoping for a little more than that, but...
Sure. So you might be wondering what the representative of an electric aeroplane company is doing on stage, right? I think it's also a reflection of what we have all come to realize, and it's that a few things have to come together to improve the world as we have it today meaningfully. So clean aviation, and I'm involved there as well, and probably they see this as double dating, but it doesn't matter. Yes, we need better flying machines. We need technology applied to the airborne part. But we also need much better ways in how we utilize these aircraft, how we fly. That's why we are taking part in SESAR, not only for the unmanned component, but literally making better use of energy as we fly, because energy is finite. Where we stand today, let me give you a perspective from a non-aviation industry, and I dressed accordingly. It's from a green application, lawnmowers. If you ask a 10-year-old today what a lawnmower looks like, what do you think they will say? They will probably point to those autonomous turtles, right, that roam the backyards, and that's a lawnmower for them. But where did lawnmowers begin? They used to be called goats, and they had a manager. And this manager was placing the goats accordingly, and the result was, spotty. So humankind invented a motorized goat. We all know those things, right? Neighbors got unhappy. The result was still dependent on the manager, the operator, sometimes better, sometimes worse, weather, many different things. Humanity involved in development of the electric goat, still depending on the manager. What really unlocked the goodness in how we see lawn mowing today? It's kind of the removal of the human aspect in this whole operation. There are situations where human actually makes situations worse. And yes, people were saying, oh, but an unmanned lawnmower may go over the flowers. Well, or it may go over my cat. Guess what? It didn't. In the end, people, innovators, got it right because they dared to try. I think we need more managerial courage to take bolder steps than ever before. And there are industries out there that have realized that more unmanned applications, and I'm not talking about drones only, can make matters significantly better. Look at the medical industry. What brings people back to life in an intensive care situation? It's automation, it's sensors, it's very delicate devices that we have come to invent. Are nuclear power stations commanded by people? Right? Chernobyls don't happen anymore, not because we gave people better screens in front of them, but because we managed to automate the delicate things. And we need a radical change in how we look at what SESAR can deliver. That's where we are today. I think we figured out what bold radical steps we can employ in flying machines. That's why we have hydrogen research now in clean aviation, an unprecedented thing even 5 years ago. Think of what's the unprecedented thing for SESAR today, and that's what we should be doing.
Thank you very much indeed. Andres, you asked for ambition, you asked people to think big. Very much doing that there. Michiel, complete the picture now, speaking with your own hat on, as distinct from the declaration itself. We'll come back to the elements of the declaration in a moment. Your assessment of where we are on that journey.
I think the good thing now is that we focus mainly on digitization, right, with the help of SESAR, Joint Undertaking, the deployment manager, compared to years ago when we started a single European sky via institutions, right? And those institutions, they didn't really deliver. It was a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of bureaucratic effort. But I think digitization can make a real difference. And if I may add to what Marc just said, I fully support the idea of this data link between air and ground. And I'd like to take it a little bit further even, the SWIM concept, right? The system-wide information management concept, as already discussed very often on several occasions and especially pushed forward by ICAO. I think that's also a very important thing, right? So if you want to upgrade your performance of your ATM system in Europe, you will have to make sure that via network manager, for instance, you'll have to make sure that you can make the next steps there. That it's not only between the aircraft and the equipment on the ground, trying to get rid of the human in the system, but it's also to make sure that all those aircraft and these ground systems, they coordinate with each other to make sure that you will not lose capacity when it's available, and that you will optimize its use. For instance, if I may, we are talking very often about flexible use of airspace. At the moment in the Netherlands, there's and Germany, by the way, and a part of Denmark, is a huge NATO exercise. It's called Frisian Flag. And it's one of the largest Air Force exercises in Europe normally. We've had a huge one, of course, in the beginning of this year. And what we try to do together with the military, very intensive planning process we have done. But I'd like to take it a little bit further. Flexible use of airspace, make it fluid use of airspace. So the moment the military uses the left side of the training area, because they are going for a tanker or something, can you not just toggle the airspace between civil and military, make sure that you have a few civil flights going through the area that they will use after the tankering part again? And it's much more fluid than flexible. And I think, you know, by having very good conversations with each other, understanding, being dynamic on information exchange, this could be one of the solutions that really will help us forward.
Thank you very much. Marc, if I could come back to you on something that the declaration very much underlines, and it underlines, and I'm quoting, we've heard it all day, but will require a substantial transition from current ATM systems. And we heard earlier about, do you build on what we've got, or do you need to create something new? How do we move forward? For you, what is the key if we're going to achieve that substantial transformation? We'll come back on the issue specifically of that coordination that you talked about earlier. But is it, as we've heard from some of our panelists, really a mindset issue? The entrepreneurship that we've talked about, is it, what is the key here from an industry perspective? And question to you all really about what drives your investments in this area. Jörg said we did it because there was a clear business case, but we've heard a lot of discussion, and Alain mentioned earlier about economic regulatory frameworks, technical regulatory frameworks. What drives your investment? But first of all, what for you is the key to the transformation?
Yes, there is both a question of mindset and a question of governance. On mindset, you have said a spirit of entrepreneurship. In Airbus, we even say we need to have a pioneering spirit. We want to pioneer sustainable aviation. And it's fantastic, you know, in this panel. You have all the capabilities to do so, the ground and the air. So, yes, Europe can pioneer sustainable aviation. Now, we have to go a step further, say how we do it collectively. Of course, we need to prioritize, because we cannot do anything, but then we need to have a timeline which is really motivating, and we know all the difficulties in SESAR is that airlines had to invest in some equipment and could not use it, and so could not have the benefit of it. This is something that has really damaged the dynamic of SESAR. So we absolutely need now to have, on the key priorities were mentioned today, a clear plan agreed by everyone, not planned for 2050, but on short term, and everybody stick to it. And for me, it's a question of leadership and governance. And so we have to solve that. But I think there is a common understanding, a general support to the development of SESAR. All the technologies are ready to be implemented. Now it's a question of coordination, and then we can deliver. This is what we do in each individual company here. We have a program, we have a planning, we have the team to do it, and we control every day how close we are to the delivery of the program and so on. We need the same spirit. So it's a fantastic opportunity. We have developed hundreds of concepts in SESAR. Now we have to select the one that will deliver the best benefit for the airlines and for climate, because we are engaged in a climate challenge and the reduction of CO2 non-CO2 effect, and then go together. Everybody's waiting that.
Other thoughts on this, Jörg? What is the key? And that point about selectivity came up earlier as well. Do we need more focus, more prioritization?
I think what we need, and I think the ATM Master Plan is a big chance that we have at the moment. I think we all actually in the room agree on the vision where we want to go to. I think it's relatively easy to really form a joint vision. Let's take an analogy. When you get married, you have the vision, you stick together for your whole life. But the difficult task is how. So how do we achieve this? And I think this has been the focus now of the revision of the ATM Master Plan to exactly give the guideline that you mentioned. That is number one. It has to be very concrete. And number two is, and I agree with you, it's about the governance. We should work together basically as one corporation. You see, like we do it in our corporation as well. We have different interests to a certain degree. That is normal, that need to be discussed. But in the end, we follow the joint vision and we come to a discussion and we come to a solution, how we want to reach that. And not necessarily all individual interests are fulfilled. But I think the governance in this is one of the keys actually to speed up the developments that are being really targeted very clearly in the mission of the ATM Master Plan.
And let me just quote from the declaration on this. This transformation, it says, presents a significant collective effort in boosting cooperation and investment on breakthrough innovations, most of which, however, cannot be addressed by any single stakeholder alone, as by essence, aviation requires common and coordinated action. As you said, Marc, you're all here on the stage together. Same question, Benjamin, if I could come back to you on this key, and we're hearing here a lot about the governance. For you, is that the central issue?
I think the key is the transformation. Once again, what we've done until now is innovation. What just happened, the discussion between Marc and Michiel just now is interesting. We talk about the data link, and then we said, oh, but they swim also, and etc. We have the data, we need to exchange the data, and etc. We focus a lot on application, which is great, but we need to build infrastructure. And I mean, I'm including myself, ourselves as industry player. We haven't, in the last 20 years, we haven't provided enough solutions, typically to ANSPs, actually, to be able to do that single European sky, open data, and etc. It's really important. We need to move to a platform, open architecture, services-oriented architecture, etc. We have the tools, we know how to do it. It's time to do it now. Once it's done, it's tough. It's not overall very sexy, let's say it. It's IT, but it's the one solution to actually be able to include quickly all those innovations that we've been working on the last years. It's the one solution to actually have the right interaction between players, the right safe and secure interaction between the players. I mean, we need, all the industries have moved to such data models and etc. And behind that technology transformation, there's a business transformation. And once again, the companies who are going to be impacted as industrial players is I mean, when I joined that industry, what shocked me is the fact that ANSP, they provide a service to airlines, so they have a pressure. Once again, we provide a system to the ANSP. And I think it was Frederick who said we need to provide a service. Why aren't we back to back? Why me as Thales, if Lufthansa has got an issue of flight, why shouldn't be part? I mean, if I'm doing a good job, I should have more money. If I'm doing a bad job, I should have less money. It's really important. And once we move and we change the architectures of the ATM systems, we'll be able to provide service all the way back to back. And I think this is the real transformation of the ATM as I see it. Yeah.
Jörg?
No, I fully agree. I think that providing the new technology or providing technologies, digitization, communication, and you said between aircraft and ground is of tremendous importance. I think what we always, and data link is a good example actually, equipping aircraft and equipping the ground with a data link facility doesn't bring us anything, nothing, zero. So we have a technology employed, but it doesn't bring us anything. What we need is the operational concepts. You see, and the people have to work with it. It took a long time actually. And in a third step, we should ask ourselves, what do we get out of this if an operational concept is really working? Do we get more capacity, more safety whatsoever? So there are always the 3 steps between employing technology, creating operational concepts, and then really looking for the bottom line to be able to create capacity or whatsoever, what the goal was.
Tine, you'd called for a radical change in how we look at what SESAR can deliver. What sort of radical change do you think we need?
So I don't have another lawnmower story. I think for the innovators, what matters is that the result is not only a collection of fantastic solutions or technologies, but assurance that those actually get used, that they do get implemented. And I think this is the key missing ingredient from these programs in the past, because we've all been observing what all can be possible, but these elements were not employed. So it's perhaps not even a matter of starting to innovate now, but having a look back and see what can be implemented quickly and across the board, systemically. When you renovate an apartment, it's not a lawnmower story. You have a choice, right? You can put in a better TV, a better kitchen, a better bathroom, or you can knock down a wall or two and fundamentally change the way we do things. Some walls will have to be knocked down. Not everyone will be satisfied, but this is the fastest way of moving forward. And for me, the wall that needs to be knocked down is voice.
Explain.
Just look at the room. People are communicating voiceless throughout the day, even with us speaking here, and there's far more communication flow, and it's totally scalable, and it's voiceless.
Thank you very much. Michiel, how radical do we need to be? And on this issue, we've been talking about implementation all day. What do you see as the key barriers we need to address? And how can the debate that we're going to have now about the master plan feed into meeting that challenge?
Well, I think 2 things, if I may. Coming back to what Benjamin said, right? He says, now we deliver a system, but we should deliver a service, right? If I understand well. And I think there's also an extra aspect to that, because as an ANSP, I think we should come back from, okay, how do we deliver value? And then if you want to deliver value, you have to define what value is, right? You have to load that subject, and then you can go back and say, okay, I require a service from maybe Thales or whoever provides it, but that's a totally fundamentally different way of thinking. For instance, at LVNL, we have implemented a decision support tool for the supervisor in the area control center. I think you saw it, Andreas, when you were at the LVNL premises. And we said, okay, we want to have a real-time simulation of different capacity measures, depending on the weather. And what we asked for a system, we did a tender, and then a party came that was really not a big party, it's a small party, it's a Dutch party, it's not well known to aviation, but they did a tremendous job. It was not an aviation partner, however, they know a lot about artificial intelligence, right? So the system learns by itself. We can have real-time simulations. Okay, what if we put the capacity to 63? What will it mean to the delay minutes? And what if we put it to 61? What will it do to the delay minutes? And so our supervisor uses it. It's not yet operationally integrated, so it's still an IT system, not an OT system. However, it works. And I think, you know, this comes from a value perspective. We gain, in non-standard weather, we gain, well, standard weather in the Netherlands, by the way, is not good. So, but we gain hundreds of minutes per day in delay reduction. And so that is just starting from the idea, how do we create value? What does value creation look like for airlines? That's delay reduction. What does it look like for society, especially in the Netherlands? You probably heard about the discussion on Schiphol, reducing the number of aircraft movements from 500,000 to 452,000. So that's a noise discussion, basically. Until 6,000 feet, above that, it's a CO2 reduction discussion. So, and then you really have to think, okay, what will reduce this noise burden for society? What will reduce CO2? And that's really, I think, a value discussion. What brings us further, I'm come back to the digitization, but also the interoperability part. Just for you to have an idea, our air traffic controllers at LVNL only see the aircraft coming into the Netherlands FIR, so the Netherlands border, they only see it 7 minutes in advance. And it's not only like that with LVNL, it's by many, many ANSPs around the world. So how can we ever guide the airplanes of Jörg, of Lufthansa Group, very efficiently to European skies? The good thing is, also under the SESAR program, we have now moved to the ITEC system, and there's CoolPens, there's CoFlight, which really helps us to be interoperable and to gain from the knowledge of other ANSPs, because they will use the same system and they will upgrade their specs, and everybody will benefit from that. And I think now it's also important to have these, I mean, in ITEC it's easy, right? But we also have to be able to talk with CoFlight and the CoPans and whatever these systems are called to make sure, and I will ask for the regulator to step up there to make sure that interoperability is arranged, because those are really steps that must be taken to make sure that we move forward.
You're beginning to identify there the key elements of this enabling environment. We'll come back on that. But Marc, Michiel, they're talking about the non-CO2 elements, and you wanted to come back on that point. So let's pick up on that now. Then I'll come out to all of you, and then we'll continue our discussion.
Yes, non-CO2 is a very interesting topic, and a very interesting topic for SESAR especially. First of all, it's a quick win, potential quick win, because non-CO2 is not cumulative. So if we are able to reduce non-CO2 impact, we will reduce the impact of aviation on climate on short term. Then the ways, it's a complex issue, so that needs research. We can act on the design of the engine, on the design of the aircraft. We can act on the fuel. We are testing the benefit of SAF on contrail especially. Then ATM is very important. MET as well, because we have to avoid the zone where there is persistence constraint. We can change the level of flight. There is a compromise to find between CO2 and non-CO2. So it's a very complex issue, but we have to address it. And I think, and we spoke about Ciconia, it's a very good topic for SESAR. First, on the research side, to know more about it. There is no immediate solution. And then work together on the most efficient solutions. And then we will reduce, on short term, the impact of aviation on climate, which doesn't prevent, of course, to continue working on safety, efficiency, capacity, and CO2, because CO2 is cumulative, and so we have to go fast on that as well. But so non-CO2 for me is a very interesting area for SESAR.
Benjamin, I think you wanted to come in here.
Yeah, I'm very happy that Marc is talking about non-CO2. I'm very happy that even after 2 minutes we started that debate, we started talking about non-CO2. 2.5 years ago, I was in a conference and I said, can I talk about non-CO2? Because some people were telling me, Benjamin, stop talking about non-CO2. You don't know what you're talking about. This is dangerous, you know. This is going to kill our industry. No, but I'm serious. And 2 years after, we changed a lot.
Sorry, just for my benefit, if not for anyone else, why did people think it was so dangerous?
Because the perception of decarbonization of aviation until very recently was we just save fuel, so we'll save the planet. Right. And non-CO2 is a bit more complicated than that. That's the point.
Right.
Suddenly, you may need to change the flight level and etc. You might need actually to consume more fuel to actually avoid the contrails, etc. So
There are trade-offs.
but we know that climate
Yeah.
is more complicated than a basic thing. But you know, I mean, the automotive industry went through that 15 years ago. Some company kind of hit the wall and crashed because of such, you know, too easy algorithm and etc. So yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting debate. The non-CO2. I mean, whatever we're changing with Airbus and a lot of the partners and etc. It's a fantastic debate, use of technology, and it's also an excellent case coming back to what I just said about exchanging data between different parties. Yes, of course. I mean, OEMs, airlines, NSPs, and etc. About how formation of contrails, how do they, and weather companies, and etc. So there's a lot of science involved, but there's a lot of data exchange and etc. So it's a great topic, and we need to tackle it. I mean, we can't avoid talking about non-CO2.
Anyone else want to come in on that before I go out to the room? Michiel's smiling at me with a no, thank you very much. I don't want to go there. Jörg, no? Yeah.
Perhaps one point I fully agree, and when we're talking about non-CO2 effects, I think the difficulty is, and that's why I think you shouldn't have mentioned it, you see, a couple of years ago, is it makes the whole system more complex, tremendously complex. So just to give you an example, when we are talking about avoiding contrails, that means flying perhaps 4,000 feet lower, which means actually having more CO2 emissions. That means as well, and that I think we should never forget, airspace is a scarce resource that we have. And we limit the ability actually to move in the anyway dense European sky. So I fully agree, it is tremendously complex. It is already complex with only saving CO2, and it becomes even more complex when you look at the other non-CO2 emissions.
Yeah, just maybe add a little bit, because this is an important factor, and just MUAC is not a part of CANSO, but still there have been in the Maastricht Upper Area Control have been experiments with avoiding contrails. Well, should be there in the evening or not in the morning or the other way around. I'm not sure at the moment, but so it is going on also in the ANSP world. So we are making progress. We are learning. We are trying to learn, but it is definitely a factor at the moment.
Tine.
I have to add to the non-CO2 emissions, right? Noise is also an element therein. Electric aircraft, of course, have the potential to lower this noise significantly, but it also brings other disadvantages. Perhaps just think how annoyed you would get by a very quietly played violin if played badly. Right?
That's like wine. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think there's many opportunities in discussing where and how we fly also the aircraft of the future, which, yes, they will emit lower decibels, but they may have annoyance factors that people just don't recognize today just because they are different, right? Yeah. And they can be made quiet and not annoying. It can be done, but it's not for a given. I think also there is an interesting opportunity discussing non-CO2 emissions, because it's what the broader society notices quickest. It's very difficult to notice CO2 emissions or a reduction thereof, even more, but everybody can see contrails and everybody can appreciate the reduction or presence of noise. So that might be a way also for our direct feedback to know if we are moving in the proper direction altogether.
Thank you very much. If we could bring the lights up just so I can see. And please do feel free. You don't actually have to ask a question. I'm very happy if you want to make a brief comment. Can we just get some light in the room so I can see hands? I see one over here. If I could ask you to introduce yourself and please be brief. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Erkki Must. I work at European Commission. I'm the policy officer for SESAR, and I have one comment and one question, especially taking the opportunity that we have industry representatives on the stage. And you know, SESAR has been since the beginning a cooperation platform between the union, between Eurocontrol and industry. And if I may say, I think since the inception, SESAR has always been there in order to solve the main problems which the industry faces in the ATM. And I think we have been quite proud in assisting the industry and putting certain funds from the European Union side into it. What has been interesting today, and in this debate as well, is that we've shifted throughout this debate between deployment and development. Deployment, development. We are now going into this one SESAR. SESAR including both of these elements, and which is fine because it shows that there has to be a sort of feedback loop from the development to deployment and vice versa. But which leads me to my question, and the question is following. The concepts which you have been mentioning today on the stage, swim, for example, or the trajectory-based flying, these are concepts which have been in the SESAR world since many years. They were part of PCP, now they are part of CP1. We are talking about concepts which are more than 10 years old. Now, you have all been recently involved in the SESAR 2020 projects, you are now involved in SESAR 3 projects. Can you please tell us what are the next big things which you are now involved in or you have just finalized in SESAR 2020 and which will be the ones that you will request everybody to deploy in a synchronized, in a coordinated manner, as we have now been discussing things which are included in the CP1, which is not an easy battle, to be honest, to deploy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's take that straight away and then I'll take some more because it's a very direct question. Can anybody pick up on that? No, nobody, they're trying not to catch my eye. Benjamin, in front of you. Use it, it doesn't matter which way, yeah.
One way to answer the question is, once again, if we move to service-oriented architecture, we will not need to talk about development and deployment anymore. There's no more deployment.
Explain.
I mean, once you're in the cloud, there's no deployment of an innovation. It's there already. I mean, today, okay, I'm exaggerating. I see some people. I see Tanya looking at me. No, I'm exaggerating, but today, bring an innovation, we build a new ATC system, and it takes us, I'm including us, it takes us forever. I'm looking at Michiel. It takes us months, years, and etc. to deploy a center. And when the country's got like 5 ACC, it takes us 2 years to deploy the new system. And that's not, in 2023, that's unacceptable. We should be in a world where we switch on at night on the server and the innovation is there the day after. Okay, we have all the safety and etc. I know all the restrictions that we have in our world and etc. But changing the architecture, we break that concept of development, deployment. It's coming together. See what I mean?
Anybody else want to come? Marc?
Yes, I think the question from development to deployment is critical in SESAR. A large flight demonstration has been a very good tool to bridge between development and implementation, to show the benefits, to identify the potential difficulties and so on. So I think this is something we have to replicate. Now, it is true that some concepts are from the beginning in SESAR, even in the DNA of SESAR, are not yet implemented. So, unfortunately, we still have to work on it. As I said before, data link is there, but not robust enough, not capacitive enough, so to still have to develop this infrastructure. And regarding the time-based operation, we are just at the beginning of it. Now, extended AMAN, better prediction of conflict, identification of wake vertex, and so on. There are many, many things to do. Huh? We are not worrying about the content of the next ATM Master Plan. One part will be the prolongation of the previous one. Another part will be really new topics that we share today to work on in the coming years. I mentioned also fellow fly as an example that can save 5% of fuel burn and so emission as well. That's a very interesting one. So we have a catalog to explore, and then of course building this ATM master plan, we have to select and give priority to the major ones through the industry and with all the stakeholders associated in SESAR.
Jörg?
Well, I think it's always valuable to use as well technologies that we have today already and bringing them really to life. And I think when I hear and I know that there is no transparency actually when an aircraft is flying in your airspace, you only know it a couple of minutes ahead. There's no transparency or full transparency between what an aircraft is doing, what level it wants to request. The ANSP doesn't know. So I think if we at least want to come, let's say, to a virtual single European sky, this data transparency, I think, is of utmost importance. And I don't know, I'm not too much a technician, But I believe actually with the technology that we have today at hand, this data transparency can be actually realized fairly quickly. And I think that would be, for all the players, tremendously important to understand what happens actually.
Tine, Michiel, do you want to come in on this? Tine.
So we were not in SESAR 1, 2, we are newcomers. But to me, the question points into the direction of what needs to happen so that people actually buy these things, right? And yes, there is the environmental factor, yes, there's the cool factor, there's the price factor, there's many, many things. But I genuinely believe that many potential users of such technologies have never seen it in action. This has been siloed and reserved in research, and it's just not opening up a lot. One of the examples, let's say, that dates about 15 years ago is an element that stopped aircraft, small aircraft, flying into mountains, into terrains, in bad weather. A certain American company now known for smartwatches, not Apple, came up with a handheld device with terrain mapping built in that you could buy for less than €1,000. It was not certified, it didn't follow any guidelines, but it did the job. It was a GPS with a terrain map built in. Almost instantly, literally, in less than a year, these accidents stopped. And when this happened, it started to put tremendous pressure on the traditional avionics makers to implement solutions and functions alike. It was almost a backdoor entry. I would like to see an app with all these things, so I, as a passenger, can look where my airline of choice could cut corners, and it's not cutting corners today, as an example. But the pull from the users is a critical element to achieve, and it's not straightforward.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from all of you? At the moment, I don't think so. I want to follow up. Sorry, I didn't catch your name at the beginning of your question, but you were talking about the role the Commission played, and you were saying how you felt, you had been supportive, funding, etc., etc. I want to ask each of you, you are here from industry today, but when we talk about that common and coordinated effort, yes, among yourselves, and the declaration underlines it over and over again. But the other players in this sphere, the policymakers, academia, and so on, I just want to ask each of you really what you see as the key to really making that work, and he told you what he gave you, what do you need from him? And what don't you need? What don't you want? It's just in terms of, we can focus on, SESAR does bring you all together, but as we go forward, what do you want from each other and the other players in this space? Who would like to pick up on that? They're all looking at each other. Michiel, I'm going to pick on you. I like the way he rubbed his hands then.
No, I thank you for the question, because it's a very important one. As I mentioned before, I think from the policymakers, really follow up on the interoperability idea. That is an idea that was pitched very early on in this whole process. It is very important. I think if we're fair, every manufacturer, I used to work for an airline, you try to make sure that you're a bit special, right? You're a bit special to your customers, and then they will pay for your product. Manufacturers do the same, which means that there's not a real built-in ambition, I would say, to make sure that this interoperability takes place, because a better interoperability may also make the exit barriers for ANSPs, better interoperability, a bit lower, which means they could change the system more often. So you really, from a policymaker perspective, I would say, help us there, because this is a very, very important element. The other thing I would say is that we have to understand that we are trying to rebuild infrastructure. And infrastructural projects, they take time. And what we really have to make sure that we keep our alignment on our goals. I think SESAR does a fantastic job there. We have to keep our alignment on the goals, but we also have to make sure that we take our governments along, take the airlines along, take even people in society along, which are not necessarily of the same opinion, by the way, as the governments are, of course, as we all know nowadays. to make sure that we do progress. We have to be pushed to progress, but we have to make sure that we understand that changing your system, changing the government demand every 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, how long does the government take nowadays? It does have an effect on the way you can do your investment in infrastructure. So I think that's why we are here all today. This is our joint undertaking, this is our deployment manager. It's very important, and we have to make sure that we do follow the path, even though, you know, things may turn out a little bit different after a few years than they were initially thought of. But at least it's a common plan, and we have to stick to it.
Marc.
Yes, I think we are expecting 4 strategic things from states and commission. The first one, which is obvious, is funding. And it's essential for the competitiveness of our industry. We are innovative and so on, but we know that in other regions in the world are benefiting strong funding from the states. And so if we want to stay competitive, we need this funding coming from the EU to help funding research and innovation in our industry. Second, it has been said, the benefit of just partnership as a GU is federating the industry, joining the effort. So use the money the best it is, with a joint effort and a good coordination in the players. Then aviation is a world of a lot of standardization and harmonization. And so the role of the EU authorities is to help set up the right standard, not to put additional constraints, but to help the industry to develop the innovation on robust and efficient standards. And don't forget also that aviation is global. So what we are expecting from the EU is not to look at EU only, but to use the power of EU to enlarge and create a level playing field across the world. And I think it's something extremely important today to not only focus on EU, but to look at the global situation. Here again, it's a question of global standards, global level playing field, and competitiveness of the aviation sector. We have a fantastic European aviation sector, but we have to be careful about maintaining, on one side, its innovation, on the other side, its competitiveness across the world. And so if you want to be really leader, that means that we have to develop something robust in Europe, but taking care of innovation and be able to export it as a standard for the other regions in the world, which means working with other authorities and working, of course, with ICAO.
Benjamin. And then Tine. And then
So perhaps the exercise I will try to do what I think we should all do, player per player. So I'll start with the industry players, typically the ATM industry players. I think we need to stop being afraid of the transformation. I'm including Thales. We need to stop scaring our customers, ANSPs and etc. We should recomfort them that we have the solution and the right technology, etc. It's important in terms of change of mind. The ANSPs, I think, they're quite ready somehow. Why? Because they're caught between the pressure of airlines and you know the technology change in us and etc. I think they're quite ready to accept, you know, a transformation into technology, etc. What I would ask is be ready to share your data. This is something very important. I mean, once again, we talk about single European sky. Let's start open European sky, open exchange, open data, etc. I think we all agree on that. So that's something very important. Regulators, governments, etc. I mean, first of all, Erki was asking the question, so taking the opportunity, I can't thank enough, I mean, the support of the European Commission and the different governments, I mean, in the world and etc. for the support to the ATM industry, especially those last 3 years, etc. I mean, without you, we wouldn't be there. I don't think I would be standing there, etc. So it's important to say thanks also sometimes. I think let's continue that. I think it's great in SESAR 3 to have new players. I'm looking at Pipistrel. I think we need a bit of entrepreneurship in the way of, sometimes it's too complex, you know, it's the European Commission and big companies like Thales and ANSPs and etc. And we make things complex, etc. We should introduce entrepreneurship, faster way to also, you know, to decide, to move forward and etc. That's something really, yeah.
I'd just like to get Tine to react to that.
And one last thing,
yeah.
And yeah, and something also more in terms of the regulation and the incentive that governments and the European Commission is giving to ANSPs. If we move to a more service model and etc., we need to move the incentives from support the ANSP into capex buying systems, than rather buying services and etc. This is important into the change of state of mind. I think it's important, yes.
You talked about that entrepreneurial spirit earlier. Do they make it too complex? Is that for you as a, as a new member of SESAR this time round? How are you finding it?
So I think there's pros and cons given the size of the player or experience. So I wouldn't like to portray the entrepreneurial spirit as the silver bullet in this. I'd like to go back to the originally posed question, what needs to happen? I think we owe it to ourselves to admit that aviation is a very rigid and regulated system. And here we are discussing how to introduce a step change in innovation on a very rigid system. It's basically the same as walking into a changing room in a department store, you know the feeling, and being asked to play tennis. It doesn't work that greatly, right? So what we need is direct and immediate opportunity to demonstrate and trial new solutions in real-life circumstances. The drone industry has played along for a long time with the notion of sandboxes. Sounds like children playing, right? But the idea is to put solutions to the test of time and to the test of real users to see what works and what doesn't. There is nothing more powerful than demonstrations. But this should transcend the drones. There should be sandboxing opportunities for larger applications, way more complex systems, ANSPs, airlines, large aircraft equipment, not only the drones. Because if we don't do that, we will continue to replay this discussion, which is fantastic in pointing out what doesn't work, what will not work. You know, people are very elaborate in explaining how things cannot happen and point out 612 different reasons per hour. What we need is people to step up and just say, let me handle that. And that might be also with a tiny bit of disregard to the rigidity of the system we enjoy, but with the responsibility of showing that it actually can work. So we need venues where we can put this to the test of time.
Jörg.
I have a wish list as well. I think firstly what we need, I think what is very important, we need a regulatory framework that actually supports what we discussed all the day. You see, since years we're talking about SES2+, it's very important that the regulatory framework is very supportive of our goals that we have. What we secondly need is, and I mentioned it earlier, we have to have a funding system. I agree with you, and I'm very grateful for the funding that we receive from Europe, but it has to reward early movers to create this entrepreneurship and increase the speed in developing systems. And the third point is we need as little as possible complexity. From an administrative point as well, it is for an airline, we don't have 100 people actually dealing with all these funding issues. It is very complex. So I think those are the 3 points on my wish list.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you 2 questions that are in the discussion paper, in the master plan discussion paper. The first is to do with the level of ambition. And I've been asking all day. The paper asked, do we have the right ambition level for the environmental performance in the master plan? So that's one level. How ambitious do we need to be? Are we ambitious enough? And the other, and the overarching question that the master plan discussion paper, that sustainability discussion paper asks is, what does the next edition of the master plan need to capture in order to, and we all know it now, shall we recite it together, make Europe the most efficient, environmental friendly sky in the world to fly. So how ambitious do we need to be, and what does it need to capture? You've all talked, and the declaration underlines just how important a moment this is. The master plan is such an opportunity. What does it need to capture? How ambitious? Michiel.
You know, we can talk about writing a new document, but we just have to start doing it. And we have to be as ambitious as we can and just start doing it. Just like Jörg mentioned, you have to, or no, I think it was Tine. You should just start and you should sandbox and you should go. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Jörg.
If you ask about the ambition level, and if I look at the ambition level that we have, let's say on the visionary basis, where we say we want to reduce CO2 burn by ATM measures between 5–10% whatsoever, I think that is ambitious. I think that is very ambitious indeed. I think where we still, I wouldn't say lacking ambition, but where we have to focus on, I said again, is the how. So the mission and the roadmap within the master plan is what I think the key element that we have to work on really to come to achieving this ambition.
Tine, you talked about being radical. Are we ambitious enough?
No. As a society, I think we've come to a situation where we always underestimate what we can do in a month. We overestimate what we can do in a year, and we grossly underestimate what can be done in a decade. Okay? 2050 is as far away as 1996. Who remembers Macarena? 1996. Time is ticking. Ambition should be higher, and we can all pull it off, and we don't have to start from scratch. There's the foundations of 2 previous programs and a lot of smart people out there, but unless we start actually working, this timeline will continue to shift and it will not compact.
Benjamin.
Yes, as ambitious as we can be, more ambitious. Yes, I would say that. We live in a world of. I think Ramon just gave a wake-up call. We live in a world of KPI. We have one KPI to safety, 100% safety. I think the complexity of what's ahead of us is there's a new KPI coming, the green one. That's a bit of a personal intuition, but perhaps because I work for a public listed company, but we're already accountable for the CO2 and etc. I think this is going to become big. It's another KPI. We'll have to deal with it, and I'm sorry, and it's going to fall on the ANSP again and etc. But yes, so this is big, and as we have a KPI, and I believe this is going to be a public KPI. Accountability in our society is becoming more and more important. It's becoming public. We're going to start engaging money there and etc. And people are going to ask us to be accountable for what we do in the green environment, just as they've been asking us to be accountable for the safety in the last 50 years.
How ambitious?
I think we have a reasonable ambition on the objectives. So on safety, capacity, environment, and so on. On environment, the objective of the Green Deal and the Destination 2050 for aviation is the contribution of ATM is 10% of CO2 emission reduction. And I understand that SESAR should bring 4% in the 10%, probably reasonable. Where we are not ambitious enough is the speed. As Ramon said, the airlines cannot wait 4 years before having the capacity needed to cope with the growth of the traffic, and same for the climate. We need to go faster. So I think this is where we should focus our efforts on the level of ambition. Go faster, deliver faster, according to our objectives.
Very much echoing the messages we've been hearing from all our panels today. And I just want to conclude then with step aside now from your declaration. In a moment, the declaration is going to be handed over to Andreas. But for each of you, and I'll just run down the line, a personal priority of all the issues you've discussed, all the many challenges we face, the many issues you want the master plan to address. If you had to pick one of them, the most important ingredient for the new master plan, for you personally, in 1 minute each, what would it be? Tine?
Less talking,
less talking. Oh dear, well that rather renders this panel redundant.
I went back to the voice comm and
Yep.
enforcement of data links and interoperability, right? But less talking.
Thank you. Jörg.
Let's get started. Let's get started bringing all those ideas that we have to life.
Marc.
TBO, because I think this is the ultimate goal and we have to keep it in mind. The best possible trajectory for airlines, for the less possible emissions. And if we can achieve that, I think we will achieve what the SESAR is for and the objective of this two debating.
Thank you very much. Michiel.
Interoperability and a lower ATCO workload.
And Benjamin.
So I'll pick engagement, individual and collective engagement. Behind that declaration, there are association, there are people who've signed, and there are people behind the people who signed. So yeah, we're taking an oath. So let's do it. Yeah.
And on that note, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed? Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for that.